Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present two people who are longtime friends, former colleagues, and both are experts in publishing and royalties. In other words, they know where to find the money and help artists keep more of it. I promise you will leave here today smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the interview. Also, and this is very important, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Special thanks to MedJet, Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, Better Than Booze, and of course, Turnkey ZRG. So let's get down to business. Today's host seat is Steve Weatherby. With over 25 years of music industry experience, Steve has held executive positions at some of the biggest major and independent companies, including Universal Music Group, Warner Music Group, BMG Music Publishing, Dell Records, as well as business management firms Goodvie, Sussman and Oppenheim, and Gelfand, Rennert and Feldman. In 2012, Steve left the corporate music space and started his own independent third-party music administration company called Sovereign Music, which he later sold to Universal Music Group in 2016. Steve's experience spans many different responsibilities, including business development, global music publishing, music distribution, downstream artist royalty accounting, mechanical rights, master performance rights, and sync. Steve is a hands-on leader who gently steers the creatively inclined through big business processes. His sound judgment and insight has established him to be a sought-after music industry advisor. Welcome, Steve. I'm so glad I finally got you on the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so humbled to be part of this.
And joining Steve is Richard Leach. Richard is managing director at Curve Royalty Systems, an award-winning and leading royalties solution for the music industry. Richard's career began in 2003 in a dusty warehouse in South London. Over 16 years, he built his knowledge of independent distribution, packing records at Cargo Records UK, telesales and key accounts at SRD, digital supply chain at IOTA, DSP terms negotiations at Essential Music and Marketing, and global digital retail marketing campaigns and playlist strategy at ADA. In late 2018, Richard pivoted to royalties. Family and friends thought he was crazy to leave the third largest record company to work as the first employee at a startup. But Richard was undeterred and convinced by the potential, of which he was proven correct when Downtown Music Holdings purchased Curve in 2022. It is my pleasure to welcome these two rock stars to our platform today. Take it away, boys.
Thank you, Tom. Richard, how you doing?
Pretty good. It's somewhat daunting and humbling hearing all that from
I know, right? I was like, I got to pay the person who created that bio for me, that intro. Maybe it was AI. I can't remember. But so you're in LA.
Yeah, I'm in LA for one more day. I've been here since Sunday. It's the first time I've been to LA in I think 8 years. Long overdue.
Wow.
And it's been an intense and rewarding and nourishing trip.
Right on. I see you brought some rain with you, so we appreciate that in
Yeah,
California.
I thought
Just
you
want to
guys.
make you feel like home a little bit.
Yeah, maybe not this much.
Right. Right. So, I guess just to kind of start off with, because this is something I've always been interested in. You and I have hung out obviously a few times, and we know each other quite well just around the royalties business. But I'm super curious, like just tell me a little bit about like how you grew up, where you grew up, like how you got into music. Like just a little bit of a background on you.
Oh, how long you got, man? So originally I'm from a town in the north of England called Sheffield, which is quite a working class city. It is the city of steel. It was where the steel manufacturing it was the heart of in the UK in like the 60s and 70s, and all of that sort of fell apart throughout the 80s and the 90s. When I was 10, so I'm from a single parent, only child background. I've never met my father. Uh, and my mother wasn't satisfied with just sort of living off the state. She wanted to be able to provide for me. So, long story short, we ended up moving to Bristol. Whilst I was in Bristol, I managed to get a decent education. I managed to pass an exam, and it wasn't quite a scholarship, but it was effectively my fees were paid for me to go to
Right
a
on.
private education school. So there's, I'm a northerner in a southern city. I'm a social housing kid going to school in a suit. I was different, and I sort of got comfortable with feeling like I was different or uncomfortable or whatever. I just sort of I
Right.
figured out how to manage that, and I was quite idealistic. I was quite creative. Um, in hindsight, I was a fairly typical ADHD kid, but I didn't know that at the time. And I I became quite immersed and interested in the music scene in Bristol, which was really interested in the 90s, in
Yeah.
like mid-teens. There was a lot of stuff that was going on that people will be familiar with, the Massive Attacks and Portisheads and Trickies of this world, but and also the drum and bass as well. But also there was a very, very interesting, vibrant, weird indie scene underneath that started to open my eyes to the industry a little bit. However, I wanted to be an artist. And I
I
mean,
was gonna say, did you play at all?
no, no, no. I was going to say not that sort of artist, a visual
Oh.
artist.
Oh, right on.
I was a painter, and that was where my ambitions lay. And so I went to university to study fine art. Um, did 3 years at uni. Got my graduation in fine art degree. Um, and at 22, sort of wondering what I was going to do with myself, I did what a lot of people do, and I moved to London.
Right.
Uh, Still very much trying to pursue a fine art career. Um, Got a job that was paying me minimum wage. Lived in a real cheap, rundown part of town, and started trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself. And I got lost. I lost my purpose. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I got to a stage where quite simply, I was living off alcohol,
Yeah.
s- smoking stuff, buying CDs, going to gigs, and I just thought I can't continue like this. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So I figured I'd get a job in the music industry to at least alleviate how much money I was spending on CDs and gig tickets, and figure
Right.
out what I was going to do from there.
Yeah.
Uh, and here I am.
But I mean, it wasn't like a dream to be in the music business from a young age. It was just kind of like it not fell in your lap. You just kind of figured out like, hey, this looks like it could be a cool industry to get into. Right.
Yeah, when I started to learn about record labels through Nine Inch Nails, I noticed that all the Nine Inch Nails releases have got these halo numbers, and that I was like, well, what's that? Why have they got that? And then I got into buying all sorts of different versions of the same record,
Yeah.
and so the productization, if you like, of the art was really interesting to me. And it took me a moment to realize, and when I say a moment, it probably took me 10 years into my career to realize why I was still where I was at, having sort of come here as a temporary measure to figure out. And it's that meeting of commerce and art,
Yeah.
that friction, that sort of explosion point that really interests me. And you know, I am in it for the culture, I'm in it for you know, all those very sort of emotive human resonance meanings, but also we've got to make money out of this thing, right?
Yeah.
And technology and innovation drives new forms of consumption, and that's just always been really fascinating to me.
Yeah. Now, were you more of like a vinyl or a CD kid? Both.
Um, so I'm 46 shortly. So when I first started buying music, it was vinyl and cassette, but very quickly it it mutated into CDs. So that's where I
Yeah.
bought most of my stuff. But one day when I was about 14, 15 years old, and I was absolutely obsessed with the Sisters of Mercy, my mum came home and she said, I found this shop and it's got this thing in the window that I think you might be interested in. So that weekend I went down and it was this 12-inch box set of Dominion, uh, Sisters of Mercy single. And it was a big box and it had a poster in it, and it had this record in it, and it had 4 tracks on it. And I was just like, what is this, man? It was a dusty secondhand shop, and it was just
Yeah.
all these weird objects that sort of looked familiar because they were CDs or vinyl, but you know, like a CD in a big gatefold 12-inch fold out thing. And I was like, I just lapped that stuff up, man. Every week I was down there and just emptying my pocket money into that shop.
Yeah. I feel like you and I, like, not to speak on your behalf, but it's like, yeah, I'm a few years older than you. I'll leave it at that. But it's like, to me, it's like the perfect time to be in the music business because historically, we got to see, 70s, 80s, 90s, which was just a completely different industry into the 2000s, right? 2020s. And it's like, I think people forget that the music industry is actually relatively young, right? When you think about it. And so a lot of the artists that we're seeing are legacy artists, like they're up there in age, and it seems really significant when they pass. And I'm always curious, like, who are we going to remember in the 2000s, 2020s, et cetera, kind of going forward. But even physical product versus digital product, right? Um, to me, I was the youngest of four. So I was that bratty little kid that would sit in on my sister's dates, like, they would put on like the Bread or ELO or Kiss album, and I'd grab the vinyl and just like read, like the album covers. And to your point, it's like you start identifying things. And at a young age, I knew who the producers were. I knew where the studios were. I knew who like some of the session musicians were. It's like I just paid attention to all of that kind of stuff. And kind of well, just to back up a little bit. So I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. Moved to Syracuse, New York, of all places, when I was 12. I thought my life was going to end at that point because I was like, oh my God, like, where are my parents taking me? But made a lot of really great friends in Syracuse, New York, and then, played soccer my whole life, football, if you will. And then, you know, was able to actually play soccer at Ohio State, which is a big university in the Midwest, probably too big for most people. And then at some point after graduation, I was just like East, West. Like I knew I wasn't good enough as an artist to like pursue it. That was like my first sort of acknowledgement. But I was like, you know what? I still want to work in the business. Like, how do I do it from Middle America? So I remember sending my resume to a friend who sent it to a friend who sent it to a friend who sent it to a friend. And it ended up with Liz Ramirez at BMG. And back then, BMG had one office in LA that had like multiple floors, but it was like 15 labels and music companies in that building. And she said, first she called me and she was like, do you know why I'm calling you? And I was like, I have no clue. And she's like, well, so and so, I think it was Joey Alvarez, for anybody who knows who Joey is, referred sent me your resume. And she said, I see that you're an Eagle Scout. And what's funny about Eagle Scout, and I don't know if Boy Scouts apply the same in sort of like England or Europe, like as it is here, but it's kind of like a boys organization, and there's Girl Scouts as well. But so my dad was very adamant about me taking that as far as it can go. So like the highest award is like Eagle Scout, and there's like three palms above it. So I have all of that. And my dad was like, "You're going to do this so that you don't go work and be an artist and be a musician." So, the irony was that's actually what got me in the door. So she basically said, "Look, if you move to LA, I'll give you a job in the mailroom." And I was like, awesome. Like I'm in. So I packed my truck, drove to LA, literally arrived at sunset in Santa Monica, parked my truck, sat on the beach, and was like, I guess this is what I'm going to do for a while. I delivered mail for about 3 months, but it was like, RCA Records, Loud, Wyndham Hill, BMG Music Publishing, like all these great, like organizations, all these companies. And at some point, people were like, why? Like, I don't understand. Like, you have a college education. Why are you delivering mail? And I was like, I just want to get a job. So Ron Fair and Bruce Floor, A&R for RCA Records, gave me an opportunity to kind of work in the A&R admin department. So I kind of started there. And then I moved from there to like BMG Music Publishing. And if you look at my resume, like I changed job every 2 years. And it looks like I couldn't hold a job, but it was actually very intentional because my whole thing was like, and I was a little bit later. So this was like I was 27 at the time. So I kind of said like, if I don't see room for growth or improvement, like promotion, I'm going to move on. So I just kept doing that. And, I don't necessarily recommend that to people, but in hindsight, I got so much experience and got to meet so many different people that each job kind of helped me get a new job and a new job and a new job. Um, and then at some point, I just, to be honest, like I got a little burnout on corporate music business. Where I was at the time, and I won't name names, it was just like, it was a large organization, but it's like, you couldn't play music in the office. Like there were no pictures on the walls. It was really bizarre. And I was like, God, it feels like I'm working for a bank. Like, so
Mm.
that's when I left. I started my own business with a good friend of mine, Jennifer Carey, who called Sovereign Music. And we kind of said to each other, like, what are the things that suck in the music business? And how can we just embrace those and handle those for the music industry? So artist royalties was kind of part of that. And it just kind of evolved as it did. And then we sold the business to Universal Ingrooves at the time, and basically kind of got jobs there in like the rights and royalties side. And then I kind of moved into business development. But it's a fascinating industry, and I think a lot of times, you know, and it's fine to go to work at a company and just 9 to 5 it, like there's nothing wrong with that. But I always kind of wanted more, and I think the older I got, I was like, wow, like we have the potential to change things if we really want to. And I think most people know technology in the music business is generally a little antiquated. So, other industries are years ahead of us. It's like, why can't we bring some of that, even just the ideas of it into? And you guys were amazing, I feel like, because, there really weren't a ton of royalty solutions at the time. So it was like you didn't really have an option, and technology was still kind of coming in and a little clunky and a little hard and a little heavy. And again, it's a responsibility like royalty counting. Like who wants to do royalty counting? Like who really wants to do royalty counting? And there are a few people out there who are really good at it, but I think the tools were hard to kind of adapt to. And you guys were one of the first companies that I felt like really kind of like punched through the ceiling with an option that was really helpful. So anyways, just kind of staying in that realm, kind of getting in some business development, it all like when people ask what I do, I'm like, I don't really know. Like I connect dots and I try to do, what I feel like is right for the industry, whether it's with an independent, a major, etc. You know?
Try and solve problems and help some people.
Yeah, but I still feel like, especially, I just remember Universal like had like a really significant royalty department. And it's a cost center for them, and the technology was old school kind of technology.
It's interesting that perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just noted Mark Spear jumping in there saying I do love royalties. Yeah,
Hi, Mark.
there's the reality is there's not a lot of people out there that do love royalties, but um this is perhaps this phrase that I use is probably more relevant, resonates more with the record side of the business than publishing. But nevertheless, it was something that I think is quite powerful when you think about what we're doing here. And I said it yesterday, having lunch with one of our clients. record labels in particular have got two jobs. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on in between those two jobs.
Right.
And a lot of really interesting, creative, fun rock and roll stuff that is of value and is of importance and can be very defining for those businesses and for those projects. But ultimately, they're all a little bit subjective, and you can navigate your way through either delivering or under or over delivering on them. But it's bookended by two things. You got to put your records out and you got to report on them.
Right.
And everybody thinks about the front end of that equation a lot. And nobody really wants to think about the other end. But if you don't pay on time and meet the obligations of that agreement, then you're done. You know, you can maybe not put the right tweet out, or your marketing campaign might not work, or you might, you know, mess up on, I don't know, a typo on the product or ship the records to the wrong shop.
Right.
But, you know, if you don't actually pay people for the records that you sold, then they're going to walk quickly.
Right. It's a relationship thing, right? Like
Yeah.
to me, I always felt like, there's always like the conversation around how artists, didn't like labels, and I think part of it was A, it's a little bit of education of understanding how the music business works, but B, it's like, if you're not getting paid or getting statements or understanding where you are financially, like it makes you a little anxious and maybe
Yeah.
insecure about the relationship.
Yeah. Transparency, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that's all we ever tried to do at Curve, is just try and make that a little bit simpler, a little bit easier, a little bit more transparent, make it a little less painful for everybody that was involved in it. And I think we did okay.
Yeah, I would say you did more than okay. And kudos to you. Seriously, like I can't, like I said, like everybody it feels like wants to kind of focus more on the creative side, right? The marketing, the bells and whistles, the shiny objects. And I feel like, and you kind of touched on it, it's like it's left brain, right brain, it's creative, it's admin. And when you're an independent, generally you're more creative than admin focused. I always
But you
joke.
have to wear both hats at
Yeah.
certain points. You
Right.
have to sort of reconcile that. And it's interesting, the personality types, the characters that we meet. And, you know, when you're talking to an entrepreneur, which is what we do in many cases, a lot of these record labels are, they might be less than 5 employees. Um, and there's a number of people that wear multiple hats within all of that, and they have a level of excellence across everything that they do, but they also naturally have certain strengths and weaknesses,
Right.
and you have to work around that. I always, another one of my little phrases, everybody does business in slightly different ways, whether that's the way they draw their contracts, or whether that's the routes to market that they have, or whether that's their understanding of how to work with data, or what they want to achieve. Everybody does it in slightly different ways, and we have to be respectful of that, but at the same time nurture and coach. Well, maybe this isn't the right thing for you, maybe this isn't the best thing for you. You're an A&R guy, or your strength is in spotting a trend and working on that trend, and maybe doing the royalties piece is something that you should let go of a little bit and move away from. And
Well, even historically, though, there's no education for royalty accounting,
Uh-huh.
right? Like accounting, but that's different than royalty accounting.
Yeah.
And I always felt that you learned royalty accounting by the system that you're using. Like you create this process, right?
Yes.
So it's like when you change systems or solutions, sometimes you're changing the mentality, and there's a logic to some of these systems that you have to get into that mentality of it. And again, like I know, Mark said he loves doing royalty accounting, and I didn't mean it as like no one likes doing royalty accounting, but I do feel like when you have the right tools, the responsibilities get a little bit easier. And I feel, and I'm going to pivot now and go into like distribution, right? So now we're seeing split payments. We're seeing distributors come up with technology or tools that basically you can handle that, but sometimes it's not really royalty accounting, right? So master split payments, is that an independence way of kind of skirting doing true royalty accounting?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's a continuation of the JV, of the 50/50 and there's an element of the 50/50 speaking to the, the indie sense of fairness and transparency, and we're in it together. But I think there's also an element of the 50-50 deal of just being like, well, this is just a lot easier.
Yeah.
We just put all the money in and then put all the invoices in and then just split the difference at the end. Then that's a lot easier than doing all those complex royalty calculations that
Right.
you see on more old school deals. And I think the splits is for me, this is a bit reductive. It's more complex than this, but it is a continuation of that theme. I think I'm getting old in that I'm a little bit sort of wedded to the idea that, is it really royalties? Isn't it just a bit easy? The thing that always strikes me still when I look at the landscape for software and people's understanding of it, when Curve popped up, there's two schools, I think, in the royalty software space. There's the old school, there's the new school. The old school is the older technology, the incumbents, they've been around a while. The interfaces aren't particularly pleasant to look at. The workflow isn't particularly intuitive. The technology may be slow and might take ages, and it can be a frustrating experience. But they do everything they're supposed to do.
Right.
Been around long enough, they've seen enough of it. They know about all the quirks. And then this is less true now today than it was maybe 5-6 years ago when Curve popped up. But back then the new school popped up and you had all these more digital first thinking solutions that were good technology, cloud-based, faster, more pleasant UI experience, and but they were digital first.
Yeah.
Some of them didn't do physical, didn't do mechanicals. They didn't think about it, and the thinking there was like, well, everyone's going to be on a JV. Well, they might be, but Led Zeppelin still need to get their royalties calculated.
Right. We always use Elvis as like our example,
Yeah,
right?
those
Like, the
deals are
Elvis
still
agreement
lying
isn't
in the
going to
wild,
change.
right? Yeah, they still need to be dealt with. And so,
Right.
when we look at our client base and how they've evolved over the years as well, they have the complete spread of those deals. Some of them,
Right.
they've got the old school breakages deals, and then they go all the way up to almost splits. So we have to somehow fit that all into one solution.
Right. Somebody had a question I thought was really good. Christian Johnston said they're in a different industry, and they said, "Is there a reluctance to adopt new creator-focused technology in the music industry?" Like just talking about like, is there a reluctance in the music business to bring in new technology? Like, I don't think there's a reluctance necessarily. I just don't think like the majors aren't really in the business of creating their own, right? I think these days it's more like have a
I
third party who's really good at it and maybe acquire or work with
I
that.
would give a resounding no to that question.
Okay.
I would say that the music industry is driven by new technology. We had shellac, then we had vinyl, then we had 8-track, and it's all about the mode of consumption. And
Right.
the mode of consumption is always about what's the new, more efficient, more interesting way. I miss mini discs. I love the whole physical element of mini discs. They were great. But there's
Right.
always been something new coming. And the music industry, it struggles with it. It has an existential crisis every single time it happens. But at the same time, it's like, well, that's what it is. That's
Well, but it also reinvents itself, right? Because I feel like even financially, like when you can introduce a new configuration, it generates more revenue, even
Mhm.
for the same artists in the same releases, right? It's just in a different format. And I'm curious to know your thoughts. Like, what comes after streaming?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've wondered about that. Maybe we're all going to end up with chips in our heads. I
Yeah.
don't know. I do think, and I've noticed somebody just pops up there about AI making a shift in royalty. Like, we'll segue into that question a little bit. We're just talking about AI for a second. You know, AI as part of something else that I think I see going on here of, actually infinite choice is no choice at all, and
Right.
having a marketplace that is fully open and accessible and full of 50 million tracks or whatever it is actually a really poor consumer experience. And, I think people are sort of stepping back from that a little bit. And, obviously there's a certain agendas being pushed about how much of that content we really want in the marketplace. And I think we'll see the DSPs start to take action somewhat on that, of just going, actually, I don't want all this stuff. I'm taking it down. It's not doing anything. It's not my job to panhandle for gold in, an almost infinite pan, uh, and be that, yeah, that point of access for absolutely everything. And I think DSPs will go, no, we sort of need to hit certain conditions, certain criteria before we're going to have this content. And then, what's the flip of that? Does something else pop up in its space? Is there, another version of YouTube or SoundCloud or whatever, where it's like, well, actually, all that stuff, like the thrift shop, or the second-hand store, where like all that stuff will sort of live.
Right.
I don't know. I'm sort of
Yeah.
curious to know what's going to happen there.
Yeah. For me, like I prefer AI not to get involved in the creative process. I think it's inevitable, but there's something just about the human nature, right? The emotion, the all that stuff, the storytelling, et cetera. Not saying AI can't do it, but for me, I would love to see AI more on the admin side, right? Like fix the metadata issues, like
Mhm.
fix, like even royalty counting, right? Like what's the future of royalty counting? Like my personal opinion is the future of royalty counting is not doing royalty counting, meaning we have a system somehow, some way, whether it's your bank account or whatever, where it's like credits and debits. That's a super high level, simplified explanation of it. But, you know, when you think about the burden of being in the music business and being independent, obviously speaking more from an independent perspective, it's like if you've got to spend so much time doing royalty counting, that's taken away from time from being creative, right? Or
Mhm.
marketing or, the creation of music, etc. I'm just curious if that drives a certain lane, you know?
I mean, we keep playing with, testing and exploring AI to actually do royalties, and because partly it's one of those things, it's both an opportunity and a threat, right? And so,
Right.
close your eyes to it at your peril, and then it's going to be a threat. But if we keep engaging and exploring with it, maybe we'll find some opportunity in it. Thus far, it's not been able to do it. It's getting better, but you ask it to do a mechanical calculation with the different stat rates or whatever,
Smoke
just
starts,
like,
yeah, smoke
yeah,
starts coming out of the
I don't
computer.
know. So, what we're trying to do is figure out, well, how can it help in what Curve does? And what Curve does is Curve helps. We're providing an awful lot of guidance and counsel, if you like. That actually, I think people think Curve is a software company, and it is, but really what we're selling is our relationships, our empathy, our understanding, our we've got all the battle scars, and we've got some more as well, actually. So, what I think what we really sell is a sense of security that it's actually going to be okay
Right.
to do your royalties. It's not going to be terrifying. How long is it
Mm.
going to take, or am I going to get it wrong? And we're trying to work out, well, how can AI assist us in that? How can it drive more self-led learning, more problem solving, more answering of questions, and just helping that on that side of things at the moment.
Yeah. I like for me, I always go back to education because I feel like that's what a lot of us do, right? On multiple sides of the business is like you take the experience of everything we've gained over the years and try to apply it to like today's business. And for me, historically, old recording contracts were clunky, right? And generally only the attorneys truly understood the language of what was happening in there. And I think when you get to the royalty clauses, a lot of times attorneys don't even understand the royalty clauses they have. It's a cut and paste. And yeah, I know you're laughing
I
because
can't tell you the amount of times that we get asked a question about how to do this, and I'm like, that was the BA guy just getting the deal done, wasn't it? Like, they don't understand how to actually do the maths and what
right,
they've written into that contract there.
right. And again, and if there's a problem, that problem just continues, you know, down the road, year after year after year. I mean, it helps auditors, they go in and they audit. But what I found is sometimes when companies are audited, they don't necessarily fix the problem. They just do the settlement and then they're like, we'll see you in 3 years. We'll do it
Yeah,
again.
do it
And
again.
you're
Yeah,
like,
we'll do
just
another
fix it.
adjustment. Yeah, yeah.
So and so I do. There's a part of me that feels like even agreements are going to become more efficient, in a sense, and maybe I use the word efficient. I don't know if that's the right word. Like I think simplify. Part of one of the things I fear about AI is, and I've done it myself, but it's like go create an agreement using AI.
You better
I'm
read.
not going to approve or reject that concept. But if you understand it, like that's one thing. But it's like my fear is you're going to go create contracts that you don't really understand the language
Yeah,
yourself, and then
yeah,
you're going to put it into play,
yeah.
and then that's just going to create issues down the road. So I think
Oh, hey, Israel.
I say AI could be good, but there's also a part. It's like I don't want it to make people lazy in the sense of like you just assume everything's taken care of. You know, like you still have to understand the process. I feel.
You do. You definitely do. You have to understand what the outcome is meant to look like from it, because I mean there's the thing, right? You end up in a situation where you have blind faith in something that you don't really understand.
Yeah.
That's also something that's true of the music industry and royalties in particular. Of like, well, how do you really know it's right? How do you And it comes back to what I say. I think what Curve is truly selling, in it's that sense of security. I I'm on a leadership training program at the moment, and one of the books that is being referred to is the Jobs to Be Done book, and there's a an analogy in that that's just I'm obsessed with at the moment. It's resonating with me so much, which is if I am selling you a drill, Steve, you're not buying a drill, you're buying a hole in the wall. Why are you buying a hole in the wall? Because you want to put a shelf up. You actually don't care about a drill. You're not passionate about drill. You don't have a collection of drills. So I'm selling you a drill, but you're buying a hole in the wall. And, what are people buying from Curve when they buy? Are they buying a software? Really? No, I don't think they are. I think there's something else going on there.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think if you just sort of think that AI is going to be, it's the same with, I think blockchain and the idea of blockchain just being this seamless experience that solves everything. I think you're missing what the whole is there. I think there's something else going on. Uh, do you if yeah if you use AI completely to do all this stuff and you don't understand it, then you don't understand your business. This is one of the things that I've really, really enjoyed over the last 5 years or so of being at Curve and meeting all the people in the royalties room, is that I previously probably thought that they were just finance people and good at maths. Actually, everybody I've met in royalties is a little bit obsessed with the music industry and understanding how it works and really
Right.
understanding how it works. Not the marketing trend or the genre trend or any of that sort of stuff. It's like, no, how do the deals work? And what does that mean? What are the trends within that? And how does that inform how we actually do business?
Yeah. No, it's kind of fascinating right now. And going back to it's like royalties is a very specific side of the business, but I think to your point, like just the education of the overall business, right? I used to feel like when you work for a major label, you're kind of a cog in a wheel. Like you were supposed to know your responsibility and nothing more. And for me, it's like I always wanted to know what came before me and what came after me. So it's like the experience that I've tried to sort of create over the years is like the second a song is written, like that entire process all the way through to the last penny paid out, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's not a perfect process. It's never been a perfect process. It may never be a perfect process just because of all the factors involved. But it's fascinating to know royalty statements, right? And it's kind of funny to even think about that out loud. It's like I always joke, like most clients, like they look at the first page of the royalty statement, right? Is it a positive or negative? And if it's positive, where's the check? And if it's
Yeah.
negative, it's like, oh, I'm not going to look. But it's like if you look past that first page, there's a lot of information about your music. And it's like you might be selling music in Austria when you have no idea why. And it's like that's fascinating. Or your biggest song might not even be included on your royalty statement and you're not looking, right? So there's a lot of education and royalty statement. I feel like you guys did a really great job of even just putting like the pie graphs, charts, like summary, like where you could kind of in a snapshot go, oh, top 5 territories, top 5 songs, like top 5 revenue sources. Like that's really helpful, I think, for people. And you don't have to be an expert to understand that. But there's so much information in the detail, and
Mm.
obviously, I remember, I can't remember where I was working at the time, but I remember getting like a Roadrunner statement, and I was like, is this like in Spanish or something? Like, I don't understand it. Like I just couldn't like make sense of it, and I was like, if I can't make sense of it, how is anybody else making sense of it? And I used to think like the majors had that was their way of sort of confusing their clients and be like, look, if we just put a lot of things on there, like they won't ask questions, when in essence it should have been you should have asked every question, like why
Yeah,
would I be in charge of this?
yeah, those sorts of conspiratorial thoughts start to
Right,
creep into your mind. But something else that we picked up recently is, the world is not your enemy. The world actually, everyone out there is your ally. Most people just aren't thinking about you. And when you feel like somebody's done you wrong, it's usually not malicious. It's usually not designed. It's almost always just either incompetence or ignorance.
right.
That those statements, and I mean, when I say incompetence, I don't necessarily always mean that as a as
Well, it might be
disparaging.
insecurity, right? Too,
It's
of not
it's just
being
that's the
afraid to
best
ask the
that they can do
question.
at that time. That's it. That's just the best that they can do at that time.
Right.
Um, yeah.
What do you miss about the old school music business?
What do I miss about the old school music business? That's an interesting question. Um,
I miss the networking. Like Dana, you're so blunt. Um, Part of that, but not exactly those examples,
gaining
but yeah.
cookies.
But like
I
I miss the parties. I mean, we used to play softball against other, major labels and stuff like that. That used to be
Yeah, I don't know if this is more actually just the place I'm at in my life at the moment, the age I'm at, but I
right.
miss the innocence a little bit. I'm the day I walked into Cargo Records, I'd written a bunch of letters to a bunch of companies, very short, very blunt, very cocky, asking for a job. And I'd literally been fired that day. It's the only job I've been fired from. I've been fired that morning. And I had an interview at Cargo Records, and I had no idea what I was walking into. And I walked into this warehouse in South London, and it really was dusty. It was absolutely filthy, but it was just jammed with records. And there was Swans, which at the time I'd never heard of, Swans blaring out of the speaker with all these kids with tattoos and punk rock haircuts, picking and packing records. And I was just like, this is where I need to be.
Yeah.
This is Aladdin's cave. This is Mecca. This is everything that I wanted to be. And I was a tough point in my life. I was earning very little money. I was still somewhat lost because, as I said, I'd taken that step in that direction as a stopgap to try and work out what I wanted to do. But actually, everything was in front of me. Not that everything's behind me now. I'm not that old, but it was just so easy. It was there was nothing to lose. Had that actually, when I joined Curve, just me and Tom, it was just like there's nothing to lose. There's everything to gain and nothing to lose, and that's a really freeing place to be. It's a lovely place.
Yeah. Bill Gagnon mentioned going to gigs, like, to your point, like, I'm of a certain age,
Yeah,
so
I miss that energy, man. I'm going to like 3, 4 nights a week
right.
gigs.
But
Do that
but that
anymore.
like like that was part of the networking, right? You go to the shows, you used to get really excited about records, new artists, etc. Like there's so much music now, which is a blessing and a curse, like, someone once told me it's like the music industry used to be more of a funnel, and you had artists, but like, only the select ones got kind of through the pipes. Now that funnel is a pipe. So when Taylor Swift releases a record and you and I, have our little side band and we release a record, like we're competing with each other. And it's
Mm.
like it's just getting harder and harder to kind of weed through that. So,
I
I think
like I like what Frank Zappa had to say on this, and I'm gonna get it wrong exactly.
yeah,
you can Google it and find out what he said, but he referred to his experience of the music industries of the 70s or the 60s through the 70s and into the 80s, and he said everybody talks about the suits and everybody like hates the suits. The guys literally they were in suits and they were chomping on cigars and they were running the business very much as a business, and everybody says talks about them in hateful terms. He said, I love the guys in the suits. And the reason why I love the guys in the suits is because they knew nothing about culture. They knew business and that was it. And so when it came to making a decision about what they should be doing A&R culturally wise, they go up to the hippie at the photocopier and ask them, the guy who was plugged in to the industry, to the scene, and then they just do what they said. He said the problem is that the kid at the photocopier with the lank hair and the scruffy jeans, they became the person in the office running the business, and they think they think they understand culture, but the thing is, they're not kids anymore. They're not in the culture, so they're making all these decisions, but actually
Right.
they're completely out of touch. They're not going and asking the new kids in whatever fashion it is that are stood at the photocopier anymore. They think that they know everything they need to know, and I liked that. I think that's a
Yeah.
way of looking at the world.
No, and there's truth to it, right? Obviously. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where the music business is in 20 years, you know.
Mm,
You're going through a lot of changes kind of right now. I mean, Curve has obviously.
yeah,
Are you excited about the future?
I mean, same old in terms of change.
The only
Uh,
constant is change.
exactly. Get used to it, really. So we are now 33 members of staff, I think, and 11 of those staff have served less than 12 months, right? So we're constantly evolving and changing and doing things, new things, different things within our business. And then obviously we're in a larger environment now since the beginning of 23 when we were acquired by Downtown, and we've been working through that. And now, as everybody knows, there's another big paradigm shift on the horizon coming. So yes, both frightened and excited as you should be. When you step forward into something, you're stepping away from something, and that's painful and frightening and exciting and all at the same time. So
Do you feel um, like sometimes during these acquisitions or just relationship changes, do you feel it can potentially impede your progress? Or do you feel like it's generally, and I know this is kind of like, anyway, you can go either way with the answer, but it's like, or does it like um progress? Like does it accelerate the progress, right? Like
yeah,
because there's
again, it does both.
transition.
Yeah,
That's
again, it does both. I mean, both when we look at the beginning of our journey, there were people that wouldn't work with us because they thought we were too small, that we were too young, that we weren't going to last, that we couldn't do what we said we were going to do. And then they came around and said, "Oh, actually, you're still here, and I know you're working with X, Y, and Z, and now we've got faith." When we were acquired by Downtown, we had the same thing. We had a bunch of people who for them, it was a validation. It gave them comfort, and for others, they were like, "Well, what are you going to do now? Who are you going to be now? I don't like them. I'm in competition with them, or whatever." And it shut some doors and it opened some doors, and
yeah.
it's. I see no reason to think it would be any different. It's
Yeah. I
maybe
feel
a
like the
little bit
bigger
more
the
exciting.
yeah, the bigger the acquisition generally to me, like things take time. And from my perspective, it's like God knows I'll be working in this industry when I'm 80, but it's like, like there's a part of me, it's like anytime there's a change or a shift in the industry, it creates opportunity,
Mhm.
and I think it's easy to say like, oh, Virgin Universal is going to take over downtown, whatever that means. But for me, it's like I feel like then that creates an opportunity, right? Where this middle
Every
tier,
risk has opportunity in it, and vice versa.
right?
It's about your perception on it. It's about your approach to it. I mean, one of the things that I learned when IOTA was acquired by Sony, and my line manager said to me at the time, and that stuck with me through our acquisition and this transaction. He said, "Look, there's nothing that you can do about it to change it. It just
Right.
is. The only thing that you can do is decide whether you're going to be on that journey or not, up to a point, because obviously you don't have full control over that. But that bit that you don't have full control over, all you can do is sort of affect your chances within that. And if you want to get emotional, if you want to flounce off, and say this isn't for me, then you're going to reduce your chances of, if you want to stay on that journey, being part of that journey. But if you just keep your head down and keep working, then you're giving yourself the best possible chance within that.
Sure.
And it was the same when we were acquired. It was the same when we started, and it's the same, where we are now. It's just, well, just keep calm, carry on.
Sure. What are you excited about?
What am I excited about? I'm excited about going home and seeing my kids.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
Two girls. I'm excited about what we're working on, development wise for Curve, what our ambitions are. I'm still 100% committed to what we do, and I'm excited about signing new clients. I'm excited about making the experience for existing clients better. I'm excited about the team that I work with. We've
Right.
managed to assemble somehow. We've managed to assemble some really great people around us, and going to work every day with them is a genuine joy.
I second that. Like when you work with the right people, or people in your ilk, if you will, like there's nothing better. The just touching on like the work from home office scenario, it's like, again, being a little older, it's like, I don't always enjoy, dealing with traffic, fighting to get to an office, spending an hour and a half in a car. But I feel like for the younger generation, like the networking, the collaboration aspect of being in person
That's
is
something I
so
miss,
important.
actually.
Yeah.
Going back to that question about, what do you miss about the music industry? I mean, for a long time, I was quite close-minded about this. The office is dead. Why do we need an office? My thinking was that it's so archaic to sort of strong arm people into coming to an office. We've demonstrated over 2 or 3 years of disruption, lockdown, that we can be productive working from home. Curve is all over the place. We're multinational. We've got characters in Philippines, in LA, in Toronto, and other countries. And so bringing everybody together is nigh on impossible. But I realized recently that there's actually so much to be gained out of sitting in a room with somebody, like team building wise, morale wise. It's when you're a small company, when there's less than six of you, you all know exactly what everybody's doing. You instinctually know what wavelength they're on, where their priorities are, what they're struggling with. You understand that, like I say, instinctually. But as you get bigger and bigger, it becomes harder to read those vibrations because there's so many of them. And
A lot is lost in text, email,
oh,
etc.
tone, and you hear, yeah, exactly. And being here this week in LA and being in the downtown office every day this week has been amazing. And we need to Curve needs to sort of think about how we do that somehow across all the territories that we're in, because it's a very difficult thing to quantify, but there's an awful lot of value in it.
Yeah, no, it's funny because when Tom initially asked us to do this, and you were like, "I'm actually going to be in LA. Can we like just do it in person?" I had this vision of like you and I at a pub, like having a few pints, even if it is 11 o'clock in the morning, but because there's something important about that
Cocaine and hookers as
pulp
well, like
culture.
old school.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, people have seen us out and about a little bit. But it's like there is something to be said about those relationships that you create. Like half of the people I'm going to say in this chat, you and I know, you know what I mean? And it's because we've worked with them. We've been around, for a number of years. And it's like I always say, the music industry is like a carousel, like a merry-go-round, right? It's like a lot of times when you change jobs, you're just kind of changing the horse, but you're in the same industry and it's not that big, so we still work with each other. And I think if you stay in the industry long enough, like, and the people who have come up with you, like, they continue to be your peers and your contacts and your relationships and your networks, and that makes it easier to pick up a phone and say, "Hey, can you do this?" or "I need this," or "Do you need that?" or like whatever it is. It's still
Yeah, and I go back
the
again to
industry.
what I said earlier that everybody really is your ally, even your competitors, everybody, because especially if you stick around in this job long enough,
Yeah,
you'll find yourself working with people that were your competitors, and
yeah.
if you
But
treat them,
Tom threw it back at me about.
yeah, well, yeah. What are you excited about? I saw that as well.
And that's a great question. I'm excited about a lot, but it's like I'm always excited about what's around the corner, and I kind of want to push some envelopes, like whether it is tech, whether it is just ideas and concepts. Like I feel like, there's a lot of us that still need to push the ideals, even if it's not the right next step, like to be sort of filtered out and be like, okay, royalties on a blockchain, I get it. It might be a good idea, but it's not going to happen now. It doesn't make sense now. So, like, let's pivot to something else. Is it AI? Great. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But for me, it's like, I'm excited to see where the music business goes. I'm excited to see where people like you are going. Like I'm a big fan of a lot of my friends in the industry, and it's like I'm a champion for them all. And I always say it's like your success is my success because if we work together on a project and we do well, that's our calling card. I get it, it's about money, but at the end of the day, is it really about money? Like,
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been saying this recently, and I realise that I'm saying that from a position of privilege now, but I have also been absolutely dirt poor in this career, and
yeah.
honest, all the things that bothered me and kept me awake at night, Tom, when I was dirt poor, getting more money didn't fix it. They're still there,
Well, and
So
sometimes making more money is uh it's a negative because
yeah, trap, yeah, for
you're
sure.
being, yeah, and yeah, I didn't want to go into detail on some of my thoughts on that, but it's just like at the end of the day, it's like you got to figure out what makes you happy. But
Well,
I think we all agree that is not always
I
a
mean,
massive paycheck.
I say this all the time in what we do, right? Most of the people that we work with are good at numbers, they understand finance, etc., etc. They are not in their jobs to earn money. They might think they are. Some of them definitely think they are, but they're really not, because if they
Yeah,
were really that focused on making money, what are they doing in the music industry? There's
yeah.
way more money to be made out of there. And so, like, everybody that we interact with, I sort of, I think it will be an interesting self-reflection and self-development to really interrogate, what is it I'm getting out of this?
Yeah.
Why am I here? And
I
the
don't have, sorry, I didn't know if you were finished with that. I was
well,
just,
just the place that hopefully that brings people to of feeling a little bit more, self-satisfaction, validation, happiness, lack of stress in their life. Because as I said, like, earning more money has not fixed anything for me.
yeah. My wife and I don't have kids of my own, but my wife and I just fostered a 2-year-old little girl and a 4-month-old little girl. Um, I just want to like spend a ton of time with them,
Mhm.
and it's funny because it's a foster situation. So everybody's got a Lola, Lolo, Grandpa, Grandma, and I'm Steve. So when you're a 2-year-old, it's like Steve, 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 Steve. Like at the moment, you're like, oh my God, if I hear that one more time. But then I went on a trip recently and I was like, oh my God, I missed that. I missed that little face,
Mhm.
that little 2-year-old saying, I love you. It's like I melt, and
Yeah,
it's balance. It's life balance, right? Like a paycheck does not necessarily create life balance. You have to create life balance.
yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
hard.
It is hard because you have to go through some, answering some difficult questions and having a little bit of honesty with yourself and realizing that some of the stuff you tell yourself isn't true. Some of
Yeah.
these things that you've built around you are holding you back, or not healthy, or you're defining yourself in ways that actually, I really believe in being honest and sincere and playing with a straight bat. And then you go, oh, actually, I'm telling myself some lies here, aren't I?
Funny, I was just talking about a person I used to work with, and I was like, God, he can sell like nobody's business. And we were talking about how you oversell. Like sometimes you overpromise, underdeliver, and it's like I'm too honest. Like I can't do that intentionally.
Mm.
And I just feel like it's being honest with yourself as far as being honest with others. And I think, those people will last a long time in this business. I think you have to be aggressive and a go-getter, but you got to work well with people, right? Like you have to, there's a give and take in this whole process and in life. And I just feel like balance is key, but it'll be interesting to see like where everything goes.
Mm. Yeah. So what keeps you up at night?
Uh, the fact that I can't hold down just one job and I gotta like I've got to have like 5 jobs at every time and but it's like, but that's my nature. Like that's just how I operate, and it's like I have chickens, like I build chicken coops, like I do all this
I
stuff.
didn't know that.
My wife is always like, can you just sit down? And I'm like, I can't. Like, I've only got a limited amount of time here. So I wish I could
Yeah.
settle down and just enjoy life a little bit more. I had to go out of town this past weekend, not to bring the chat down, but it's like one of my best friends growing up. lost his 17-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son in a car accident.
Oh,
And
wow.
and
That's
it's
awesome.
only children. And it's like when you think about that and you think about getting up in the morning and trying to figure out what drives you, it's hard, right? So, I was kind of telling them, like, I wish everybody, like, there's wisdom in that, you know what I mean? Of just understanding how life should work, because you just never know when something's going to happen and it's going to change everything.
Yeah, yeah.
If I can leave
Every
it on a positive note,
every day is a gift.
yeah, every day is a gift. So, all right, man. Wow.
Well, that was a little deep, but that's okay.
I was gonna say, do we leave it at that? I don't
No,
know.
I'm always like to wrap up. When I don't hear my guests ask a question, I like to ask this question. What was the first concert you guys attended? And what was the first record you bought with your own money?
Oh my gosh.
Excuse me. So
Both kind of
go.
embarrassing, but
No, no way it's embarrassing. What was the first show you went to?
so the first show I went to was Kiss and Queensryche in Syracuse, New York at the
Wow.
War Memorial.
Strong. What
Yeah.
year?
Oh my God, I can't remember. Probably 86, 85, 86, I would
That's a good
assume.
one.
Yeah, and then I didn't buy this particular record with my own money. That's that one I don't know if I can remember, but I remember getting the Rod Stewart album with Hot Legs on it when I was like 12, and I was like, I would not stop playing that record. Just it's like back in that day, it was like vinyl. So I had a record player outside playing the vinyl while I was like playing basketball.
Solid foundation for a successful career in the music industry,
I think I
Steve.
just dated myself
How about
significantly.
you, Richard?
So my first love was Queen.
Ah, yeah.
And I bought the Invisible Man 7-inch single from Woolworths when I was maybe 8, something like that. It was definitely in the 80s, towards the end of the 80s. My first show, I was a little late on the show front in starting. I didn't start going to gigs until I was about 17. Um, Now I'd bought my own ticket to what was going to be my first show, and then my mum bought me a ticket to another show, which ended up being before that. So she bought me for my birthday. She bought me a ticket to go and see Everything But the Girl, which I wasn't particularly bothered by Everything But the Girl, but Tracy Thorn was the vocalist on a couple of tracks for Massive Attack, which I was obsessed by, and they'd had their big single Missing, the Todd Terry remix, which you couldn't get away from that year in the UK. So that's why she bought me that. But the ticket that I'd bought was Aphex Twin, which is a huge obsession of mine, and I've been to see him 7 or 8 times now in various different parts of the world. So I'm dead chuffing myself that somehow that was nearly my first show.
You're a lot younger than me. Of course, everyone's a lot younger than me.
I'm
Well,
probably right there with you, Tom.
Well, gentlemen, let me just say thank you very much for doing this. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Steve, I've been chasing you for a long time, so I'm glad you've slowed down enough for me to capture you and bring
Thank
you to
you.
our audience. And thank you for bringing Richard. To the audience, I promised you'd leave today smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. These guys gave you a lot of really good real world wisdom in addition to some music industry wisdom. So thanks for that. Come back next week. We're going to be talking a little bit about AI next week. And so I look forward to that. In the meantime, be nice to each other. Stay warm and dry. If you're in the United States right now, you're having a challenge, regardless of where you are on that. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
everybody. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Richard.
Cheers, Steve. See you.
Bye.